Good morning, everyone. I'm Kathy Olson, CEO of the Owensboro Museum of Science and History. Welcome to New Year's Eve 2020 online. You know, we are full of artifacts and specimens here at the museum. All of these artifacts have a story to tell, but the museum really comes alive when we have our patrons that are here inside of the museum. And it's a little bit lonely here. But fortunately for us, thanks to Professor G and Chad Benefield from WBKR, we are going to be presenting an incredible New Year's Eve program online for you today. We have presenters, local presenters, and presenters from the region that are going to be giving all kinds of science demos and interesting history lessons and a few surprises too. So we hope that you stay tuned for our virtual balloon drop as well. And in 2021, we look forward to seeing you here at the museum. Thank you.
Kathy, thanks so much. This is going to be a great time. And I'm so thrilled to be your host. I'm commanding the ship this afternoon. I'm Chad Benefield from WBKR. Okay, I gotta let y'all in on a little bit of a secret, all right? So the museum is closed right now, but I'm in it. I have access to it, and there's literally nobody around, which means I get free reign at the museum. And okay, I'm 49 years old, but really and truly, I'm like 6 years old. So right now, we're gonna have some fun before New Year's Eve. Let's do it! Woo! Oh, that's gonna leave a mark. Treehouse! This is awesome! Oh, okay. I think it'd be easier to navigate if I was 6. Oh, wait. Okay, this is kind of cool and also a little unnerving. Okay, balance beam. Oh my gosh. What? Okay, hold on. Balance beam. Channel Simone Biles. Did it! All right. This is a great way to spend New Year's Eve, people, at the museum. Wait. Train! All right, good times. All right. On the Owensboro Express. Oh, this is good times. Okay, wait. Hey! So this is really cool. Throughout the program today, obviously, we're leading up to the huge balloon drop, right? At noon, New Year's Eve. However, we have a great list of special guests lined up. In fact, okay, hold on. Okay, back. We have a great special guest. His name is Mitch Lumen. He has a bunch of experiments to lead you all through. In fact, the very first one he's going to do today is called the chemistry of colors. Perfect being on this train, which is very colorful. So, in about 2 minutes, Mitch is going to begin, and I'm going to exit the train as we continue here at the Owensboro Museum of Science and History.
Hi, this is Mitch Lumen, Director of Science Experiences at the Evansville Museum of Arts, History, and Science. And welcome to New Year's Eve at the Owensboro Museum of History and Science. I'm here today to demonstrate a chemical demonstration that involves processes that may be a little difficult to explain, but nonetheless make a rainbow of colors. Chemistry is all about chemical reactions, and you probably know some chemical reactions already. One of the chemical reactions that we're going to do today creates the color blue, another one creates the color kind of red, and the other one creates the color green. And all this will happen in one container. We're going to look at this demonstration in detail in just a few moments, so let's watch. I've introduced several different chemicals in this container and an indicator solution, and what you're wanting to watch for here is the changing of the colors of the solution. It's already went from red to green and now it will proceed to blue, and then after some time and maybe a little agitation, it will change to red again. What we're actually experiencing here is a chemical reaction known as a cerium catalyzed bromate malic acid reaction. That's a lot of words for a really interesting color change that you're seeing here. There is a specific concentration of an atom in here, actually an ion of the atom known as bromine, and the bromide ion concentration changes in a repetitive way, and the indicator solution either adds or subtracts to the colors, giving you the blues, the reds, the greens, and the purples. Not all chemical reactions are nearly this colorful, but this is one that we wanted to share today here at the Owensboro Museum. And as you can see here, this demonstration did show chemical reactions occurring. The special chemical reaction that you saw here is not something that happens every day. You need to have precisely measured amounts of the liquid chemical materials that you're using, and you need to make sure everything is in perfect cleanliness and order in order for the experiment to work. This has been a science demonstration brought to you on New Year's Eve. Happy New Year.
One of the cool parts about being in a museum is like the artifacts and these really cool historical pieces you can look at and learn about. So I have a few to show you today, and I am prepared. I have the official Owensboro Museum of Science and History gloves, which I'll be honest, kind of makes me feel like Hamburger Helper, but come on. So you're gonna love this, and perfect backdrop for this with our buggy here. But this is a newspaper. Now look at this. This is from Western America, and it's from 1813, and clearly in 1813, we spelled Western a little differently. But one of the cool parts about this newspaper, this is actually blown up for your reading pleasure. There were some ads taken out by folks whose horses were missing, and they think they were stolen. So, I mean, who takes a horse? Like, wouldn't you be seen? Horses weigh like 2,000 pounds. Anyway, take a look. So, taken up by John Scott of said county, living about 2 mules from the mouth of Brashears Creek, one bay mare about 14 hands high. Wait, I'm giving you hands high here. About 5 years old and branded on the near shoulder and buttock with a figure 3. Okay, can I just say right now, the idea of branding on the buttock sounds painful. No thanks. But that horse was appraised at like $30 on June of 1813. Isn't that wild? So what's really cool about artifacts like this is starting in 2021, you're going to be able to see some of these. In fact, throughout the event today, we're going to introduce you to some more to give you a little taste of what the Owensboro Museum of Science and History has to offer. So here at the Owensboro Museum of Science and History, this is really fascinating because you get to see animals that you may never get a chance to see in person, but you can see them here at the museum. The bobcat, which by the way, I kind of want to pet, but it's all fun and games till they eat your face off. And then the beaver, which is so cool. And I love this. I've never seen one of these and I really want to sometime, but the river otter, it's so cute. And this is awesome. Look at this, a bald eagle. By the way, did you know we actually have an eagle that lives here in Davis County? Seriously, friends of mine have seen it flying around town and stuff, and you may see it someday too. But to tell you more about it, we're going to welcome to the program Dr. Micah Perkins from OCTC. He's coming up.
Hello, my name is Micah Perkins and I teach biology here at Owensboro Community and Technical College, and I want to thank you for joining me for my segment of the Owensboro Museum Science and History's New Year's Eve virtual celebration. My topic relates to both science and history. Today we're going to look a little bit at the bald eagle, and I have this framed Audubon print behind me, and this is the bald eagle. It may not actually look like it, but it is. So getting the glare off there. So this is a juvenile bald eagle, and Audubon, one of his great paintings, did this in the early 1800s. So you'll notice when you think about the bald eagle, you have a white head and a white tail, but that type of plumage does not come in until about 4 to 6 years of age. So the overall science of this bird is interesting, but also the history. This is our national symbol of the United States. And the bald eagle only lives naturally in North America, from Canada, Mexico, United States, for there. So it's a really interesting bird, and it is known as a raptor. So hawks, owls, eagles are all called raptors, or birds of prey, in which they have talons, in a sense, for their toenails. They have a sharp beak, and they have really good eyesight. And I have a authentic replica, which basically means a real fake. This is a bald eagle foot, and it's not from a real bird. It is a fake, but to actually show you the talons of what a bald eagle would actually have. 3 toes in the front, 1 toe in the back. These really sharp toenails for grabbing their prey, known as talons. So bald eagles are our national symbol. That eagle, many other birds are protected birds. It's also known as what we call a white-headed sea eagle. But we know it as the bald eagle, and has this interesting scientific name called Hylaeetus leucocephalus. So the bald eagle is not bald like me, but actually have that white head to it, is where that name actually come from. So the female is actually bigger than the male, and some of the largest on record could have a wingspan from 6 to 8 feet. As I mentioned before, about 4 to 6 years of age, they get that traditional white tail and white head plumage. So showing you a few other things, this is another authentic replica of a bald eagle egg. So bigger than a chicken egg. So when the bald eagles nest, they often lay around 2 of these, and for their nest in the winter as spring comes about. Also to show you a replica skull for the bald eagle. So bald eagle, of course, is a bird. And what's interesting with many birds are going to have this actually bone called the sclerotic ring that's, with their eyes. So really interesting skull. It's not from a real bald eagle, but you can actually see that beak for tearing meat. So the bald eagle is not only a hunter, but is also called an opportunistic scavenger. So finding dead food, could actually steal food from other birds of prey, pelicans, other birds as well. So that bald eagle will eat fish, squirrels, reptiles, wading birds, ducks, roadkill, many different food items. So I want to also play the call for the bald eagle. It's not actually what you think it might actually sound like. So I'm gonna pull these speakers close and see if we can hear that. Bald eagle. Pretty interesting call that the bald eagle has. So I'm actually going to continue my segment, and we're actually going to be outdoors and learn more about the bald eagle. So stay tuned. This is Micah Perkins again, still talking about the bald eagle. Now we're outside, and I'm standing next to this truck and just kind of use this as a visual to think about how big bald eagle nests can be. So I've heard a lot describe bald eagle nests can actually fit and fill the entire space in the back of a pickup truck. So when you think of a bald eagle nest, kind of think about the size of a queen size bed. But they can even get bigger than that. The largest nest recorded has actually been about 8 feet across the nest and 18 feet deep. And that nest, there's some others that really, some of the biggest ones have weighed up to 6,000 pounds. So we're talking a nest in a tree that weighs about 3 tons. So eagles will often use that same nest year after year, adding more sticks and adding to it. So 6,000 pounds, some of the biggest nests on recorded for bald eagles, is actually weighs more than this truck. So really interesting about the overall breeding biology associated with the bald eagle. So you just think about the large nature of that nest. Most of them about the size of a queen size bed, going between 3 to 5 feet across and about 3 feet deep. So we'll talk a little more in just a little bit, and we'll hear more about the bald eagle. Thank you. This is Micah Perkins again, talking about the bald eagle, and I'm here at the OCTC Virginia Miles Nature Center, and we are looking at a bald eagle nest way off in the distance, not at the Nature Center, down in the stream area. My finger's at area you may not be able to see, but there were bald eagles at this nest back in March, April of 2020. So with the camera and assistance from other faculty, we actually able to take a long distance picture and confirm that we saw 2 bald eagles at that nest. Now, whether that nest was actually successful and there was eggs laid and those nestlings actually fledged the nest, I'm not sure, but there's at least an attempt. So bald eagles that would be at that nest would mate for life until actually one of them would pass on, and the surviving one could actually go find another mate. So you may not be able to see the nest, but this day and age in 2020, it's the best time to be alive to actually see bald eagles. You can see them here in Davis County. I've actually even seen some fly over in Owensboro, Kentucky. So with the protection of habitat, protecting the bird, elimination of certain pesticides, we actually have more bald eagles than we have in the last 100 years. So interesting about their nest, I mentioned they'll build on that nest each year. It's a really large nest, and some years they'll use that nest, but then they may start another one, but then come back to it. They may have a couple nests in that territory, but they may only use one nest, of course, a year. So they start, with the whole breeding process, of course, in winter, because they need to get those young ready for that next year. So really interesting about bald eagles and nesting. It makes the largest nest of any bird in North America. And making a nest on one of the larger trees. Bald eagles will mostly nest on trees, but they can use human-made structures at times. So hopefully you guys are enjoying the Owensboro Museum of Science and History and learn a little bit more about bald eagles. And it's been an interesting 2020, and hopefully we have a great 2021, and looking forward to
learn more about bald eagles, and you guys have a great year. So thank you.
Hello, this is Micah Perkins, and we're learning more about the bald eagle. Here, December 2020, we spotted and have a little video footage of a live bald eagle. In the following video, you will see a bald eagle sitting out in the middle of the field, then little parts of the video showing that eagle taking to the air. During this video series, I pointed out a bald eagle nest not too far from OCTC, and this actual bird could be one that defends that nest in that territory. So enjoy the video.
So big. Ow! Good. Okay, hello. So being inside the museum myself, I found something that I didn't even know was here. Yo, this is awesome. It is the first People of Yellow Bank's Native American Gallery, okay? It's just a short walk up like half a flight of stairs. I'm gonna take you inside. Let's go. This is so cool. By the way, my hand was not injured. Yes, it was in the making of this film. I'm gonna send somebody that bill. But look at this, isn't this cool? I mean, it is so cool up here. And by the way, different periods you get to take advantage of and learn about. And then there are some artifacts. We've been showing you all artifacts throughout the day, but look at this. And what's really cool about this particular section of the museum is you get to see the entire museum up here. Isn't this cool? Like, and okay, pardon the pun, but let me just say, you kind of get a bird's eye view. Yeah, I said it. So this is really cool. If you've been to the Owensboro Museum of Science and History, you probably have seen the Wild Winds machine. So if you get in this chamber, it actually demonstrates what 78-mile-per-hour tornado winds are like. That's really cool, right? Well, speaking of cool, Mitch Lumen is back, and he's going to be demonstrating a really cool experiment that not only involves tornadoes, but also fire. So get ready, it's coming your way in 2 minutes.
Hi, this is Mitch Lumen, Director of Science Experiences at the Evansville Museum in Evansville. And welcome to New Year's Eve at the Owensboro Museum of History and Science. Today I have a demonstration involving fire and tornadoes, two really cool things. We're going to start a fire in just a moment, but I wanted to stop before we got too far and mention to you what a fire is. A fire is a combustion reaction where something burns. Our atmosphere, where we live, supports fire, and because of that, you must be really careful with fire because fires have a habit of getting out of hand really quickly. We're going to be using this apparatus here to make our fire tornado, so let's get started. The ingredients that I need is something that is combustible. In this case, I am using plain lighter fluid. And inside of this wastebasket, I have a container which will contain my lighter fluid. So I'm going to add a little bit to my container. And putting that to the side, I'm going to use this lighter to get my fire going. Once the fire is going, I want you to notice two things. I want you to notice the color of the fire, and I want you to notice whether it sinks or rises. Here we go. So here's our fire. What color do you see? It's kind of a yellowish color. That lets you know that something is burning. And you also notice that the heat is causing the fire to go higher and higher. Hot air does in fact rise. But watch what happens when I introduce a force. The wastebasket is able to spin, and the force that I'm creating here is going to change the nature of the fire. A fire tornado. Now without that force, a force being something that's pushing on the air inside of the tornado device, the fire will just rise due to the heat that it creates. But once I make the fire tornado, you got a good example of what it looks like when you introduce a force into normal flame. Now fire tornadoes are a real thing. fire tornado is possible in very hot fires. Such fires have been occurring more recently in California, for instance, where large fires suck in a lot of air. That hot air rises from all directions and creates a fire tornado. Tornado force winds, fire temperatures, two terrible conditions. Conditions which unfortunately we're seeing a lot more of as our climate warms and forest fires, particularly of the scale that can create a fire tornado, become more prevalent. This has been a science demonstration brought to you today on New Year's Eve by the Evansville Museum. Happy New Year, everyone.
So being in the museum by myself is really kind of fun. I highly recommend it. You'll never get a chance to do it, but I highly recommend it. So this is really cool. Now, one of the artifacts that we have stumbled across today involves Abraham Lincoln, okay? And it's an official telegram from 1862, which, I mean, let's be honest, the middle of the Civil War. Are you all ready to see this? This is right here in Owensboro, Davis County at the museum. Come take a look at this. That is an original telegraph submitted by Abraham Lincoln. This was actually submitted, you guys can see right there, on August 31st of 1862. And this was sent to Colonel Herman Hopp of the Union Army. Now, the day before, the Army of Northern Virginia under General Robert E. Lee had inflicted a severe defeat on Union forces under General John Pope in the Second Battle of Bull Run. So as you can see, President Lincoln is saying, "What news do you hear firing this morning?" That's on display, or will be on display, right here at the Owensboro Museum of Science and History. A little Abraham Lincoln for you. One of the coolest parts of the Owensboro Museum of Science and History is this, the Wendell Ford Education Center. What's really cool about this, especially if you're a history buff, you like politics, you get a really good look at politics in Davis County, how that relates to politics in Kentucky, and then with Wendell Ford, of course, how that relates to politics in the United States from a congressional standpoint. Love this room. There's so much to learn here. And speaking of history, y'all know a big part of Kentucky history, one of our famed sports legends is from right here in the Commonwealth, Muhammad Ali. I mean, floats like a butterfly, stings like a bee. So coming up, we have Matt Alschbach with us, who's going to give you a little history about Muhammad Ali.
My name is Matt Alschbach, and I am a professor at the Owensboro Community and Technical College. And as you can see, I'm coming to you from the deck of the Starship Enterprise. I'm really excited to talk with you today about a really important figure in Kentucky history and in United States history. And I'm talking about the legendary boxer and athlete Muhammad Ali. So let me share my screen and we'll jump right in. All right. So you're looking at an image of a really important boxer and sports figure in American history and in Kentucky history, a man by the name of Muhammad Ali. But the first thing it's important to remember is that he was not born Muhammad Ali. That is not his birth name. His birth name was actually Cassius Clay Jr., and he was born in the city of Louisville. And that's important because he is today one of the most recognizable athletes and sports figures, not only in Kentucky history, but in American history. He is often referred to as the greatest fighter who ever lived, and I'll explain why that's so important as we move forward here. Now, the first thing we need to know about Muhammad Ali, or Cassius Clay, is that he came from a very poor family in West Louisville. His great-grandparents had been slaves in the state of Kentucky. And growing up in West Louisville, his family didn't have a lot of money. And so to help his family out, he began boxing at the age of just 12 years old in order to help out his family. Now, the reason he started boxing is because someone had stolen his bicycle, and he was really upset about that. And he was talking to a police officer, and the police officer asked him, what had happened with his bicycle. And Muhammad Ali, or Cassius Clay at that time, said that he was upset and that he wanted to beat up the person that had stolen his bike. Well, that never happened. He never found out who stole his bike, but it did motivate him to become an athlete and a professional fighter. And so at the age of just 12, he began fighting amateur bouts. And by the time he was in his teens, he was actually being featured on a local television show called Tomorrow's Champions. And on that show, he made $4 whenever his fights were televised. And of course, $4 by today's standards is not a lot of money, but for a very poor family of color living in Louisville, that really helped the family out. And so he was already helping his family to make ends meet at a very early age. Now, Cassius Clay, of course, that's the name he went by until he was 22 years old, was really the portrait of physical fitness. He was the ideal boxer or fighter. He was 6'3" tall, so he was very tall. His weight fluctuated early in his career. He was about 216 pounds, but later on in his 30s, he weighed closer to 236 pounds. So he put on some muscle as time went on. Now, one of the things that people know about Cassius Clay, or Muhammad Ali, is that he was very charismatic. He was very intelligent. He was outspoken. He was very bold. And that made some people not like him. There were people that were critical of him. There were people who criticized him. And he didn't care. He said what he felt needed to be said. He was not intimidated by these people. And as you can see from these pictures, he was a very powerful fighter, a very fierce competitor in the ring. One of his trademark statements was float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. And this made some people like him, the fact that he was so outspoken, that he was such a colorful individual with his language, with his dialogue, because he was a really interesting person. But it also made some people resent him or not like him. The fact that he was a person of color, a minority, a young black man who had a lot to say. Some people were critical of him for this. Now, his professional career as a fighter begins when he is just 18 years old. He wins a gold medal in the 1960 Olympics as a light heavyweight, and so thus kicks off his career as a professional fighter. Now, he wins his first heavyweight bout at just 22 years old in February of 1964 when he beat the current champ, a guy by the name of Sonny Liston. And so he becomes the heavyweight champion of the world at just 22 years old. Of course, that's very young. He then changed his name to Muhammad Ali in 1964 after converting to the religion of Islam. He became a member of the Nation of Islam. He was a Muslim. And so we have to keep in mind that Islam and the religion of Islam was a minority religion. It still is. And so this seemed like a foreign religion to some people, but it's important to remember that for African Americans and people of color, this was a religion that they identified with. They found purpose, they found meaning in that particular religion. And so he converts to the religion of Islam. And some Americans were offended by this. In particular, some white Americans took issue with this. Some people said that this Muhammad Ali, as he went by after this time, that he had forsaken the faith of his parents. His parents had been Christians. Some people said that he was un-American. Some people said that he was a radical. So he garnered a lot of criticism, again, because he was a young black man and he was outspoken, and he had decided to convert to this religion that seemed alien to some people. And we have some images here of Muhammad Ali, again, as a young man, praying, as you can see, in a mosque with some people there at the bottom right. And then there are photos of him there with Elijah Muhammad, the founder of the Nation of Islam, right here. And then with Malcolm X, another important figure in African American civil rights history. A little bit later in 1967, Muhammad Ali, that's what he went by now, received a draft notice to fight in the Vietnam War. Now, the Vietnam War was a very controversial war. It was not going very well for the United States. And Muhammad Ali, based on his religious convictions, his religious beliefs, he refused to report for service. He refused to go and fight in the war. And he refused to do this based on religious grounds. And this made a lot of people upset as well. Muhammad Ali was eventually convicted of draft evasion, of refusing to go and fight in the war. Many people saw this as unpatriotic. They took issue with this because there were a lot of people going and serving their country and doing what needed to be done. And Muhammad Ali, who of course was a fighter, he was a warrior, he fought and made money with his fists. So the idea that he was refusing to go and fight somewhere else, this really, a lot of people had a hard time understanding why he would do this. And eventually he was convicted. He was fined $10,000, which was a lot of money, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. But he appealed that. So he didn't go to jail right away. He appealed it, and some of the higher courts decided whether or not he was actually guilty of the thing that he was being accused of. And so there was about a 3-year period when he was not allowed to fight. He was stripped of the heavyweight title of the world. He was barred from fighting in the United States. And so many people found this distasteful, this idea that he would not go and serve his country, that he would not go and fight. And you see newspaper here basically saying the same thing. Well, during that 3-year hiatus, when he was not allowed to fight or box professionally in the United States, he moved to the city of Chicago and he became very active in the Nation of Islam. So he really embraced his faith during this time. And during this time, he was offered millions and millions of dollars to go and fight in other countries around the world, but he refused. He stood by his conviction. So rather than taking the money, which would have been the easy thing to do, he decided to go and fight a moral battle here at home, this idea that he should not be required to go and fight in a war that he did not believe in. And so instead, he toured the United States over this 3-year period, speaking in defense of religious freedom and in defense of civil rights and civil liberties at colleges and universities around the country. And so he became a leader in the American civil rights movement, advocating for the rights of minorities and people of color and African Americans. And so he becomes a well-known figure because he stood by his convictions. He stood by his beliefs and the things that he cared about. And so Ali appealed his sentence all the way to the US Supreme Court, which is the highest court in the land. And in 1970, 3 years later, he is fully exonerated of all charges. So he is cleared of any wrongdoing, and he is allowed to then fight professionally again. And so we have to keep in mind that he was a very young man, and so he had lost 3 years of his prime career as a boxer. Boxing is a sport for young people, and so he lost 3 years. That was a really important section of his career. But of course, he'd already been heavyweight, but he wanted to regain the title. So after being readmitted to the World Boxing Association, he won several heavyweight fights, and that led to the first of several fights between him and the then current heavyweight champion, a really tough guy by the name of Joe Frazier. And you see an image of Joe Frazier there on the left. And so this fight between Joe Frazier and the underdog Muhammad Ali was billed as the fight of the century. It took place in 1971 in New York City. The winner would earn $1 million, which was just an enormous amount of money at that time. Well, Frazier dominated the late rounds of this fight and ended up beating Muhammad Ali. He retained his championship. So although he didn't knock out Muhammad Ali, he did enough to win in a what we call a split decision. And so he retained the title. But despite losing that fight, Muhammad Ali did not give up. He was determined to be the champion once again. And I have to talk about why this is so important. We have to realize that losing is just part of life. Defeat is just part of life, and it makes us stronger. There are some really important lessons to be learned from failure. In fact, I would argue that we often learn more from failure than we do from success. And so just keep in mind that if you're not good at something, if you don't succeed the first time around, there's no reason to get frustrated or to give up. You just have to work a little bit harder and make a little bit more effort, and you can achieve the things that you want to do. It's important to be persistent and not to give up, and to pursue the things that are really important to you. And that's what Muhammad Ali did. And so that brings us to the so-called Rumble in the Jungle. This was a fight that took place on the continent of Africa in the country of Zaire between the new heavyweight champion, a guy by the name of George Foreman, and Muhammad Ali. So we have a new heavyweight champion, George Foreman, but Muhammad Ali comes in again as the underdog. And George Foreman was a very powerful, very punishing fighter. He was a very formidable opponent. And so most people believed that Muhammad Ali was going to lose this fight. As I said, Foreman was a hard-hitting puncher, and he had a really kind of tough, hard-nosed style where he just stood toe-to-toe with his opponents and just pummeled them. And so there was this belief that Muhammad Ali wasn't going to win. But look at this. The amount of money that was awarded to both fighters, win or lose, was $5 million. So there was a lot of money to be won and earned by winning or losing this particular fight. And in this fight, Muhammad Ali won. He prevailed and he knocked out George Foreman in the 8th round. Now, I need to just mention about George Foreman. George Foreman is actually a very nice man. He's still alive today. And if you've ever used a George Foreman grill, that's named after this guy. George Foreman is the creator, the founder of the George Foreman grill. So after being a professional boxer, he went on and became a spokesperson for the George Foreman grill, and he made a lot of money doing that. So he was a very smart man as well. But in this fight, George Foreman ended up being defeated. And you see the images here that Muhammad Ali really took the battle to him and ended up knocking out George Foreman, which was very difficult to do because he was a very tough and powerful fighter himself. And so Muhammad Ali regains the title at 32 years of age. And keep in mind, 32 is fairly old for a boxer. Boxing, again, is a young man's sport. So it was remarkable that Muhammad Ali was able to take the title and become heavyweight champion of the world again at 32 years old. Now, in all, Muhammad Ali was in hundreds of boxing matches throughout his career. He actually lost the title a few times and then won it back a few times. He was heavyweight champion of the world 3 different times. We have an image here of Muhammad Ali fighting a guy by the name of Leon Spinks. And in the first fight in 1970, Leon Spinks beat the champion Muhammad Ali. Several months later, there was a rematch. Muhammad Ali came back and he beat Leon Spinks and took the title once again. So again, it's this idea that even though he got defeated, even though he was beaten, he came back again and again. He refused to give up. He regained the title again and again. And ultimately, Muhammad Ali retired from the sport of boxing in 1981. As I said, hundreds of boxing matches throughout his career. And tragically, Muhammad Ali was diagnosed later in life with Parkinson's disease. This is a degenerative condition, and it is believed that the onset of this condition in Muhammad Ali was brought about in part because of all of the fights that he was in, because of all of the concussions that he had undertaken or that had happened to him during his career. Now, Muhammad Ali, he passed away in 2016. He's no longer with us, but he became a landmark figure in the boxing world and in professional sports. Muhammad Ali's significance to Kentucky history is really important. He stood up for civil rights and freedom of religious expression. He was a man of ideals. He was a man of convictions. He stood up for the things that he believed in, and he didn't back down. He was also very likable. He was very funny. He was very humorous. He was an entertainer, very iconic, very hardworking, the very best at his profession. He wanted to be the best. And so he becomes the most recognizable athlete in the sport, in part because of these fights that took place in the Philippines and in other countries. That made him recognizable internationally with millions and millions of people around the world. And today, Muhammad Ali is viewed as the greatest fighter in history. And the reason why that's so important is in most sports, there's a debate about who the very best is. So, for example, in the sport of professional football, some people say that Tom Brady was the best quarterback of all time, but other people say it was Joe Montana. In basketball, some people say it was Kobe Bryant, other people say it's LeBron James. But in boxing, there's very little debate about who the best fighter was. In boxing, most professional boxers, most professional athletes acknowledge that Muhammad Ali was the very best. And that's important because he was a Kentuckian, right? He was a person who had started from very humble roots and worked his way up to become the very best. Now, I do want to mention, he met a lot of important and famous people in his life. So here we have images of him, top left corner, that's him meeting Michael Jackson. Top right, that's him meeting the king of rock and roll, that's Elvis Presley. Bottom left corner, that's Muhammad Ali meeting Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator. And then bottom right, that's a photo of Muhammad Ali with the Fab Four, also known as the Beatles, one of the most iconic rock bands in history. So he met a lot of really important people. He did a lot of television shows, he even did a few movies. And it's really important to recognize that both the Black population in Kentucky as well as America's Black population really viewed Muhammad Ali with great pride. He was a symbol of what could be accomplished. And in many ways, he became their mouthpiece. He spoke for them because he was so outspoken about ideas like racial justice, this idea that everyone should be created equal and with the same opportunities. He was a man of morals and a man of convictions. So he was, again, this poor Black Kentuckian who became incredibly successful, recognizable around the world. And so he was someone that people could look up to. Both Black and white Kentuckians, both Black and white Americans could look up to Muhammad Ali. And so he inspired many young people to have dreams and aspirations and to believe that they could be something, that they could do the thing that they wanted to do, that if they had a goal, that they could reach it through hard work. And so, as I mentioned today, Muhammad Ali is considered to be one of the greatest fighters who ever lived. And of course, we have this image of Muhammad Ali playing around with members of the Jackson Five. So a very recognizable person, a very inspirational person was Muhammad Ali. I encourage all of you to go out and read a little bit more on Muhammad Ali. His story is very important to American history and to Kentucky history. I appreciate your time today, and I hope you have a great New Year's.
Hey! I'm just hanging out over Davis Street here at the Owensboro Museum of Science and History. Okay, y'all, have you been outside today? It is freezing. It's even cold in here, kind of hanging out in this little contraption that sort of dangles you over the sidewalk. This is really, really cool. So our buddy Mitch Lumen is going to come back. Gonna rub the hands a little bit. And he has a really cool experiment about cold liquid nitrogen. Are y'all ready for this? It's coming your way!
Hi, I'm Mitch Lumen, Director of Science Experiences at the Evansville Museum, and welcome to New Year's Eve at the Owensboro Museum of History and Science. Today, we're going to do some experiments with things that are very cold. It's a world that we don't normally experience, even on the coldest winter days. We'll be experimenting with a material known as liquid nitrogen. We live in a world made up of molecules and atoms and all manner of things, chemistry and science. When we look at the states of matter, we find that there's actually 3 different states of matter. You probably know what they are already. This is a solid. This is one of the states of matter. This is a liquid. It is another state of matter. And the air you breathe and many other materials are in the form of gases such as this propane, which causes flames to occur when you ignite it. These 3 states of matter are basic in our world that we live in, and a lot of times we experience matter changing forms from one to another. Can you think of a material that changes from a solid to a liquid to a gas? Water is a great example. If you guessed water, good job. Water can exist when it's very cold as a solid, when it's not so cold as a liquid, and when it's very hot, it changes from a liquid to a gas. Many materials experience this behavior. Everything in the universe is made up of very tiny particles and materials known as atoms, and those atoms are connected together to form molecules. Here's an example of a molecule that we've already talked about. This is a diagram of 2 hydrogen atoms, or 1 hydrogen atom and 2 oxygen atoms. 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom, which is water. And this is a great material because we're all familiar with it, but it's just one example of a molecule. Now, molecules, such as the molecules in this room and the room that you're in, are all vibrating. They vibrate in a way that you can't really detect, but there is a way that you can measure this vibration. We call it temperature. Temperature is a measurement of the general vibration of things. And we're going to get to liquid nitrogen in just a moment, but bear with me because temperature is very important. Temperature allows us to express how fast the molecules are moving. For instance, in this room, the room that I am in, the molecules are vibrating in such a way that it causes room temperature. The slower molecules vibrate, and remember, molecules are parts of atoms that you can't see that are very, very tiny. When molecules vibrate very, very slow, we find very cold temperatures on the thermometer. On the other hand, when molecules vibrate really fast, temperatures are expressed as very hot temperatures, and this is going to be important. This is water in its liquid state. Does anybody know the temperature which water freezes? Well, it's not frozen now, but if you were to chill this container to 32 degrees Fahrenheit, it would become a solid. Does anybody know the temperature that water boils? Well, you'd have to increase the temperature of the room quite a bit for this to boil. 212 degrees Fahrenheit causes this water to change to a gas. There's a gas in this room that is in every room on Earth and every place on the planet. It's a gas called nitrogen. And nitrogen is a very large component of our air. In fact, it makes up about 78% of the air you breathe. Take a breath in right now, a really big breath, and then let it out. If you breathed in and breathed out, you actually took in a lot of nitrogen and some oxygen as well and some other things in the air, and you exhaled what you didn't need, and that would have been primarily the oxygen or the nitrogen. Nitrogen is very prevalent in our atmosphere, but your body can't use it, so it just pretty much goes into your lungs and then comes right back out. Well, today we're going to do some experiments with nitrogen, and even though it's present in the air, there is a way to collect it, and the way that we're going to collect it today has to do with making it very, very cold. Nitrogen is a gas at room temperature, and right now in this room, it's about 70 degrees. how cold would you have to get this room before the nitrogen in the air turned from a gas to a liquid? Well, you'd have to get pretty cold. And I have in my hands a way to demonstrate how cold you would have to get the air before the nitrogen in the air became a liquid. On this piece of paper, I have 70 degrees marked. That's the temperature in the room. You'd need to get a lot colder than room temperature, as I said, before the nitrogen in the room, which is a gas, would turn into a liquid. Even freezing is not cold enough to turn nitrogen gas into a liquid. Even 0 degrees is not cold enough. Even minus 100 degrees below freezing is not cold enough. And you'd have to go down even below 200 degrees below zero, and still it's not cold enough. You would have to go all the way past 300 degrees to a whopping 321 degrees before nitrogen in the air turned to a liquid. And I have some examples of what that looks like right here. I'm going to be wearing some protective gear because this material is very cold and I wouldn't want to get any on parts of my skin that were exposed. This container contains liquid nitrogen. It is very cold. It's in a special container because if I had not put this in the container, it would all disappear and go back into the air rather quickly. If I dumped a little bit of this material out, you'll notice that before I dump it out, there's quite a bit of mist forming in that general area of the lip of the container, and that's because the material is so cold in here that it chills the air and causes the water vapor naturally present in just about every place to turn into a vapor. And as I dump this material out, you can see that it causes no spills on my table because pretty much instantly the material disappears and goes back into a gas. Liquid nitrogen actually boils. It actually boils at room temperature. Let me show you what I mean. This is a tea kettle. What do you boil in a tea kettle? Water. Water boils at 212 degrees, which is a lot warmer than room temperature. Let's see what happens when I put some of this liquid material into this tea kettle, put the lid on, do you hear that? That's the sound of the material changing from a liquid to a gas. And the whistle is the same whistle that you'd hear if this was boiling water. But as I said, nitrogen gas as a liquid boils at room temperature. There's some properties of liquid nitrogen that we haven't talked about yet. Sure, it's really cold and it has to be kept in special containers, but what about introducing regular everyday materials into this very cold world? Well, I placed some of the liquid in here, and you notice that the lip of the container is big enough that it won't fit the balloon in the end. But because this is so cold, watch what happens to the air inside this balloon as I dunk it inside. Going. Going. Almost there. Something's happening inside. I have the balloon in. Let's see what we've got inside now. You ready? We have a very shrunken balloon. But wait, there's more. As the air inside of the balloon expands, the balloon is regaining its original size. This goes to show that air can be compressed and takes up less volume inside this balloon. It's right back to the way it was. No air came out of this balloon and no air came in. I only caused the air to become so cold that it took up so little space that the balloon did not expand to the size that it normally would, and it shrunk to a very small size. So liquid nitrogen has the ability to cause the air to take up less volume. There are other experiments that you can do with this super cold liquid, and you might wonder what uses that it has in practical terms. Some physicians use it for medical treatments, removing unwanted things on people's skin. It's also used in food processing and in many industrial processes. Because it's so cold, it has unique properties that allows many different processes to be made. In conclusion, common day objects should not be exposed to such cold conditions. This is a good example. This is a formerly living thing. It is a carnation. What do you think is going to happen when I put it inside this very cold material, which is 321 degrees below zero? Let's see. It's getting cold. It's getting very cold. It is pretty cold. I'm going to remove it in a moment. And there you have it, a very cold carnation. Not much change, but watch what happens when I grasp it. One of the reasons why organic material should never be exposed to such cold temperatures. So this has been a Science of Cold demonstration brought to you by the Owensboro Museum for New Year's Eve. Have a great day, everyone.
Okay, so I know it's kind of dark right now. In fact, this is very night at the museum, right? I'm going to show you all something that is really, really cool. It's from the 1700s. Now, it's in my hand right now. You may be able to see it, but I'm holding a brown Betty lamp that folks actually used for light. In fact, let there be light! Isn't this cool? You all know what you're thinking. That's a really tiny lamp, but people actually used to use these for light. And okay, this is where it gets kind of interesting. They didn't use light bulbs or kerosene or anything like that. They used animal fat. They would put animal fat in this and burn it, and it would give off a glow. And let's be honest, lots of smoke, okay? But yeah, hold on, I'm gonna go walk around with my brown Betty lamp. Hello? I need some possum fat to put in this, or some bear fat. Hello? But yeah, one of the really cool things on display in 2021 at the Owensboro Museum of Science and History. Now, lights out. All right, children, prepare to be mind blown. I'm going to show you a computer, and you're not going to believe what it looks like. Come with me. Here at the Owensboro Museum of Science and History, they're home to what is called a Minivac 601. I'm going to let y'all kind of look at this for a second. Taking that in. This is from 1961, what you're looking at. This cost $85. And it was a kit that you would put together at home. This is a computer. That's not what your computer looks like, right? Let me show you what my computer looks like. That's what my computer looks like. But in 1961, this was a computer. It's really kind of fascinating. And what's really crazy about this, I don't have a clue how to use any of that. You know what I would look like using this? I would look like this. I would be monkeying around trying to use a Minivac 601. But if you want to see this, don't forget, starting in 2021, these artifacts just like this are going to be on display here at the museum. You got to come see them in person. I know it's kind of cool seeing them on your computers at home, but come see this computer in person. Yeah, Minivac 601. No idea how to use it. To me, this looks like the board game Operation. I want to pull out a rib. This has been an absolute blast hanging out at the Owensboro Museum of Science and History today, getting you all ready for the main event, the big balloon drop. All right, let's be honest here, gang. 2020 has been a year like we never expected, right? I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. I was in New York City in the middle of March for an annual trip, not knowing when I flew into New York City on a Tuesday morning, I was going to be flying out on Friday afternoon. And since that time, well, you all have seen, our worlds have been turned upside down. So today, we get to actually look forward to 2021 as we say goodbye to 2020. And to look forward to 2021, we have our annual balloon drop. Now, obviously, a little different this year. It's going to be done virtually, but you know what? This balloon drop is going to blow your minds. And that countdown is going to begin in just a couple of minutes. I know you've been waiting for it, so let's do it together. Let's let the countdown begin. Let's have a balloon drop, and let's look forward to 2021.
All right, welcome to the virtual balloon drop. Don't bother me, just having a little fun dancing to this afternoon's party that we've had online. And to the right. All right, thank you again, welcome. Before we get going, for 2020 balloon drop, I want to thank Kathy Olson from the Museum of Science and History. I want to thank Chad Benefield from WBKR. And I want to thank Mitch Lumen from Evansville Science Museum. I want to thank Micah Perkins from Owensboro Community and Technical College. And Matt Alsbach from Owensboro Community and Technical College. And Josephine Gesser, who's going to give us a special song at the end of the balloon drop. I'm Chad Gesser, Prof G Entertainment Services. We do hope you had a wonderful time today. A different version of the balloon drop, but we hope you were entertained and maybe learned something. And we're really thrilled to wrap up today by bringing you now the countdown. And I hope you got your party hats and your dancing shoes on. And I want you to count with me when we get to the 10-second mark, all right? Here under the mammoth at the museum, noon, Year's Eve 2020. And remember, when we get to 10 seconds, you're going to start counting with me. Here we go. We're getting ready. All right, here we go. You ready? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year!